Hi folks, Chris Schmidt, Key West Makers. Today I want to step you through how I made this flip top tool cart, which holds both my Dewalt planer and, if we flip it, my jet spindle sander on the other side. Additionally, it has this nice tool storage spot down below that pulls out for storing the accessories and tools needed to operate these machines. But before we get started on the build, I want to give you a little bit of the backstory. Because, spoiler alert, there was a bit of a failure in the build and an original design. A couple weeks ago, I came in my shop. I was looking around and realized I had come to that point where I had far too many tools for the space, or at least the way that it was organized. And I decided that I would make a flip-top cart to save space on these two things that were kind of sitting out in the middle of my shop area and causing me to trip over them. I have done a number of flip-top tool carts in my various shops over the years and a little bit bored with making them. And if I can't be excited about a video, I can't really make something that you're going to enjoy watching. So I thought, hey, I will challenge myself by trying to design a flip-top tool cart where the mechanism, the flip mechanism, is completely hidden from the exterior. You can't see it at all. Fair enough. I thought it was enough of a challenge, but not too difficult. Had a couple of ideas in my head, so off I went. As I mentioned, the first version was less than perfect. The entire thing caved in with these two tools sitting on top of it. But I did a redesign. You'll see that, and it's much better. I love it. Very sturdy. No problem flipping this around in circles at this point. At the end of the video, I will also cover a couple more ideas that I have. So if you want to make this tool cart, you can probably even improve on what I have done here. With that, let's get started. To get started, I measured the larger of the two tools that were going to get mounted and added a minimum ½ inch to the width and the depth to determine the size of the top. Then I got to breaking down the plywood sheets outside to manageable sizes and then finished cutting the pieces to their final dimensions on the table saw. So there are two sides that are exactly the same. There are two pieces to the top that are exactly the same. There's the bottom and then the lower shelf. Those are exactly the same. And then these extra cutoff pieces I will use as the drawer parts. The two horizontal pieces, the very bottom piece and then above the drawers, are going to get dadoed and rabbited into the sides. A groove that is in the middle of the wood, not along the edge, is a dado. Along the edge, it is a rabbet. So I use my dado stack and cut those grooves in the side. Now I mark my blades so that I know which ones are used for 3/4 inch plywood. And that's always a starting point. 3/4 inch plywood is never exactly 3/4 of an inch. It's quite a bit smaller. So I start out with the dado stack with all the blades that are marked for 3/4 inch plywood. I run a piece through and then I'll have to add some shims to get to the perfect size. Shaboom shaboygan, there you go. With the dado stack set exactly the thickness of the mating plywood, I'll go ahead and cut the dados. And then I'll put this sacrificial fence in that allows me to cut the rabbets. Without that sacrificial fence, the blade would rub up against the fence of the table saw and cut into it. And of course, a few obligatory shots of the glue up and clamp up, making sure that everything's really flush. And the carcass is actually upside down on the bench here. That slot you're looking at, or that opening, is at the base of the carcass, and that's where the drawer slides in. So both of these tools have parts and accessories that have to get stored on the tool, and both of the manufacturers have done a great job of creating onboard tool storage so you don't lose those bits and pieces. On the sander, you've got the spindles, you've got the plates that go around them. The Dewalt planer has some tools for taking it apart and changing the wearable items. However, None of them work in the anti-gravity mode when the tool is upside down in my flip cart. So I'm going to make a drawer, and I make a fairly simple drawer construction here. 4 sides, obviously. The front, back, and side parts are left over from cutting the cabinet side, so they're going to be 3/4 inch plywood, and the bottom I cut out of 1/2 inch plywood. It will be built using pocket hole screws in the front and back pieces where they butt up against the sides. The holes on the back will be facing the back so they won't be seen, and the holes on the front panel will be facing the front and will be covered up with a decorative edge. The front and the sides also have a dado around the bottom where the drawer slides into, and that will be a replaceable drawer. So the back will be cut a little bit short. The back piece will be cut a little bit short for the panel, the bottom panel, to slide into, and then it'll get screws through that bottom panel into the bottom edge of the back side of the drawer. To mount the drawer slides on the drawer, I'm just going to put these little shims, if you will, underneath the drawer, just to raise it up just enough to clear the bottom of the cabinet when it slides in and out. I'm adding a back panel to the drawer compartment, and that should really help with rigidity. So fix that in place with pocket hole screws. I want to put some banding over the edges, all these exposed edges of the plywood, and I happen to have some probably 1/8 inch wide strips or thick strips of mahogany from another project, I'm guessing from my kitchen island project. So I have ripped those just to about 3/4 inch, a little bit thicker than the plywood, and then I've cut them to length. We'll fit these on there, we'll glue, and then just tack them on with the pin nailer while they dry. And then once they're dried, I'll come over and probably with either sander or a hand plane and just make sure that they're trimmed exactly to the width. With the trim on and a few coats of polyurethane applied, I've finished installing the drawer. Because I offset the slides on the drawer sides, I can mount the other portion of the slides flush against the base of the cabinet. I'm going to put a drawer front on the drawer, so I need the slide set back the depth of the drawer front, of this additional drawer front. I have a little piece of that drawer front material here, and that's how I'll determine the setback. So I have 2 pieces of 1/4 inch thick mahogany that I'm going to glue and tack in place as the front panel for the drawer. And then I've got a block of ash here that I'm going to route out a groove on the back for a hand pull. So let's get started on the top here. The way the top will work, it will be a sheet of plywood. Sandwiched in between there will be MDF, and then another sheet of plywood. Inside of there, we're gonna fit a dowel, 3/4 inch dowel, and that is what the whole thing is gonna flip on. You'll see it in just a second. You could ask, why are you using MDF sandwiched in between and not plywood itself? The dowel that I have here is 3/4 inch. Plywood, 3/4 inch plywood, is not 3/4 inch thick. It is a little bit thinner, so this would not fit in between there if I used plywood as the meat in the sandwich. So I've got my pin nailer. I'm going to glue and pin nail these in place, then glue and pin nail the far ones. Then I'll come back and cut some to fit in between those, glue and pin nail those. And then when I get the whole sandwich done, I will put the top on it, the top piece of bread, and then we'll clamp it all up. So the pin nails are really just to hold it in place while we're getting the whole thing assembled here. These 2 pieces in the middle are really critical to holding the dowel in place once it's all assembled. And I'll just add a couple more strips on the side here to give it more rigidity. One of the tools weighs just about 100 pounds, so make that surface nice and tough. So when the glue is dried on the top here, I put the trim piece on it just like I did on the frame. A little bit of mahogany trim, about 1/8 of an inch thick. And then I put a little bit of coat of polyurethane on it. Now you can see that we still have this 3/4 by 3/4 inch square in the end of it that goes all the way through. And that's where the dowel that it rotates on, right? It rotates whoop, whoop, this way. One tool mounted on either side. That dowel will go through and stick out a little bit more than 3/4 of an inch. And on the ends, we will have a little mount that this dowel sits in, and that mount will then be glued to the carcass itself. So for that mount, I want a circle in a circle. It's gonna, like a donut. I'll start by making the donut holes on the drill press using a Forstner bit. And then I'll move over to the bandsaw where I'll cut the outside of the circle, and it doesn't need to be perfect since it won't be seen as it'll be inset into the top of the table. This dowel is now the exact distance to sit in between here. Our perfect circles are going to sit at the ends. Our donuts, anyway. They're going to sit at the ends. They will be glued onto the dowel. They will also be glued to the carcass, fixed to the carcass. The dowel will be stationary. The top will flip over it. Why not make these holes here? The dowel stationary on the flip top and then rotate inside of these. For wear purposes, there is much more surface area on the inside of that tabletop to wear. That's number one. So this is not going to wear very much on the inside as we flip and rotate it. But also, I want these donuts glued to the end of the rod and the donuts glued to the end of this. This is going to give this some rigidity at the top. The top of the carcass, which has no other support up here, can't go in or go out. It's going to maintain. These will stay parallel. Well, let's get on it. Additionally, before we get on it, I need to countersink these donuts into the sides of the top, because I don't. It's going to be about 1/16 of an inch narrower, probably 1/16 of an inch narrower than the top here. And these mounting donuts I want hidden inside of here, recessed inside of the top so you can't see them. That's my little secret. So I've made this little fella. This is just a scrap piece of plywood that I used a Forstner bit to cut out a hole that is just a little bit larger than my donuts. I will mount this on here and then use that Forstner bit to inset a circle inside of here, right around that square hole. So I've got it clamped in my end vise here. I also have a box under this end. I've clamped my jig in here, and I'm going to do my best now not to ruin this top, to completely destroy my project. So I realized when I got in the house last night and downloaded all the video that the card was full at the end, and I didn't capture fitting the dowel into the top. So I'm going to show you the result here, and then I'll walk back and we'll kind of go through the steps of how we got there. So what we have right now is a dowel that runs through the middle of the top here. It is capped on either end by the donuts that we made, and the donuts are flush with the dowel. However, they protrude a little bit, about a 1/64 of an inch from beyond the end of the top itself, right? So these little donuts stick out a bit. The donuts are glued onto the dowels, but the dowel itself spins freely inside of the top. So the dowel again was trimmed exactly to the length of the width of the carcass. The top here is actually trimmed about a 32nd of an inch narrower. Obviously we had the holes into the end of the top here, inset in the end of the top. Next step was to glue one end of the dowel into one of the donuts flush. So that was glued on. I waxed the dowel with some finishing wax so it would run smoothly inside of the top when I inserted it here. Then after it was in, I glued the other end, the other donut into the other end. I put a little bit of glue on each of the donuts and then a little bit of paste wax around that in case I got any squeeze out, it wouldn't glue the top of the table to the sides. Then I very carefully aligned the top inside of the carcass so I didn't smear glue all over, clamped it and let it dry. And this seems like a good time to put the casters on while the top is drying. Whole thing is working, it spins. Now it's time to put the, I don't know what you call these things. These are spring-loaded. I call them spring-loaded things. Spring-loaded latches, that's what they're called, spring-loaded latches. So I have these spring-loaded latches. They're going to go underneath the front lip and this bolt will fit into the side of the cabinet. When on the side that's flipped up, they'll be visible in the back, but I'm okay with that. As long as they're not in the way of the hardware, which I hope they're not. So let's get two of these mounted up. I have a self-centering bit in my drill, and we can get going. Unfortunately, due to camera issues, I didn't capture the drilling of the holes for the spring-loaded latches in the side of the cabinet, nor did I film mounting up the equipment, nor, unfortunately, did I film the test and the catastrophic failure that ensued. This is actually some shots after I picked everything back up and sort of loaded it back into position. You can see the holes where the latches are, and you can also see the failure of the mechanism. We'll pick back up after I glued everything back in place and set out to redesign the mechanism. A couple of things failed. It was when this top was twisting, when I was rotating all that weight, it was like twisting the top off of the muffin, and the glue or the lamination in this donut failed, but also the inside the plywood on the side itself also failed. To help that, I have made some dowels with my little dowel making jig. If you watch my vlog series, I'll show you how I use this. So I have some ash here that I've made the dowels from, and the ash is very similar in color to the oak plywood. So one will go right in the middle, and then to keep it from spinning, I'm going to put some smaller dowels right in the sides here. I've put a piece of tape on my drill bit here so I know exactly how far to drill in, when to stop. I don't want to go into the top. So I will put this first one in, then I'll come back and glue the other two, cut and glue the other two smaller dowels and finish it on the other side. We'll let that dry, and then we'll do the old flip test again with the extremely heavy Well, folks, it's 5 a.m. the next morning. I wanted the glue to dry before I test this next step. This is where it failed last time. I couldn't sleep. I'm out here fairly early. I'm apprehensive. I'm excited. I'm probably another word I can't think of because it's too early. But I'm going to unlatch this, spin it around. We're going to see how this fix worked. And here it is, all done. The mechanism, as you see, works quite well. I'm very pleased with it. I had a ton of fun building this, despite all the failures. That was actually quite a bit of fun for me. What would I do differently? Obviously, the mechanism, I still like the idea of having it hidden. I do think that I would either make those donuts out of a hardwood, or I would actually extend the dowel past the donut and into the side. You'd have to then assemble it with those pieces in there, the sides with the rod in between, but that could easily be done. And in fact, you could probably sandwich the top around the bar afterwards. Additionally, it's pretty sturdy left to right here, but I might in the back here I might actually run a panel up a little bit farther. If I had made the top of the drawer compartment a 3/4 of an inch shallower, I could have actually extended that piece, that little sort of supporting piece that's on the back of the drawer, up a little bit, sort of in a U shape to help brace it side to side. Other than that, not too much. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, folks. Maybe you learned something, learned what to do, what not to do. Maybe you're inspired. If you have some more ideas on how we can improve this, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to see your flip carts. If you did enjoy it, tell somebody. If not, don't tell anybody at all. For now, folks, this is Chris Schmidt signing off from Key West. Be good to yourselves and be good to one another.